Welcome to Busted Speakers, I'm Ed.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Cam.
Today we're going to be reviewing The Avalanche by Owen, who you may know as the artist pseudonym of Mike Kinsella, who is arguably best known for his guitar playing and lead vocals in the seminal emo math rock outfit American Football. And with that band's recent reformation and release of 2 follow-up self-titled albums to what was originally their only full-length release back in '99, it's kind of interesting to see that given Kinsella spent the bulk of American football's inactive period releasing far more material by comparison under the Owen name, it's interesting to see that American football is kind of still held in higher regard, and I think a lot of people actually haven't heard of this solo project. But maybe that'll change with this new one that seems to be getting some good reception, The Avalanche. It's his first solo album since 2016, and yeah, I'm curious what you guys think of it.
Well, I have no point of reference to any American football stuff. I can't say for sure if I've heard even one song from them. Yes, not even, what was it, that Never Meant?
Yeah, that is definitely probably their most well-known song.
I know of the song, I haven't heard it, so that's a big oops on my part, but
Yeah, I think that one was released as a single in 2014, well after the first album.
Yeah, it was like a 15th anniversary remaster of American Football, the 99 album.
Yeah.
My only past experience with Kinsella's music is the 2005 or 6 album, At Home with Owen.
Mm-hmm.
This album does feel like a natural progression from there. I know he's made another 3 or 4 albums since then, but this expands from a lot of the same evocative, beautiful sounding themes from that album. Definitely sounds quite similar if expanded. He enhances on some of the ideas from there and makes everything a lot more atmospheric and tonally just beautiful sounding. I mean, it does sound nice, but this is actually quite a sad album, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely got a bit of a melancholy vibe to it.
It's almost morose at points. I mean, it sounds really nice, but a lot of the songs are just damn sad. So even though I really like this album, it can be hard to listen to, especially when you dig in deeper. So yeah, I quite like this album, but I guess with a few caveats attached.
Nice. Yeah, I'm curious. There's a question that maybe you could answer for me, because I haven't heard any Owen material before this album. And I know he generally leans on more of an indie folk type sound rather than the more math rock inspired elements of American Football's albums, where they have, arpeggiated guitar melodies kind of locking together in interesting ways and played in interesting rhythms, uncommon rhythms. This is a bit more similar to more traditional indie folk type stuff, with some elements of American Football sound in there too. But I was wondering if all the additional layers of instrumentation in here, like strings and pianos and whatnot, are they present on the older Owen album that you heard as well? Because all those elements kind of came up in a big way on the last American Football album, I think, more so than their first 2. And that's one of the things that this has in common with that album as well. So I'm curious to know if it's been present in Owen's music for a much longer time.
Yep, it has.
That's cool.
No, I mean, yeah, that was something I heard on At Home with Owen, especially on the song. Well, it's weird, those elements are present, but there also could be quite sparse, minimal songs, but the arrangements and musical components are still quite strong and lovely, and a slightly less developed version of this. So yeah, that album, At Home with Owen, definitely check that out if you like this one. That's all I'll say. But I'm excited to just hear the rest of his stuff, basically.
Yeah, I think you should check out American Football as well, because this, you can tell this is by the same guy. You can tell he's one of the driving forces in the band he's more famed for.
Absolutely. It's just one of my blind spots so far.
Yeah. What did you make of it, Cam? General thoughts?
So when I looked up Mike Kinsella to figure out, just who he was, the first name that I saw, and I think I mentally stopped at, was Captain Jazz. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I know Captain Jazz. I've got the compilation on Alpha Beta Polyethology. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. And then I remembered, oh yeah, he's also in American football because I always associate Captain Jazz with the Promise Ring, who some of the other members of Captain Jazz went on to create. I forgot that American football was associated with them too, and I didn't even think about using them as a reference point. Um,
Hmm.
but either way, no matter what, like I have heard the first American football album recently, and I don't think I've heard two or three. But this album definitely caught me off guard. Maybe it's because I'm not overly familiar with Mike Kinsella's like a personality, but I was expecting it to be kind of more in a rock-oriented emo revival style more than this densely orchestrated indie pop kind of emo.
Oh yeah, and even though it's quite densely layered, it's definitely on the softer side of
Yeah,
things
yeah.
as well. Like usually when people say emo music, I guess it's more associated with like stuff that's more on the post-hardcore side of things maybe. But yeah, this is definitely a lot softer.
But then you get other stuff like, yeah, other softer stuff like Sorority Noise and
Oh yeah.
I don't know, some other bands I've heard other than this one, so I guess it depends. Does he sing, so he sings like this on American football stuff?
Well, that's
Or
the thing.
similar enough?
The first American football album, the vocals are very masked by the instrumentals. Like they're not very
Right.
upfront in the mix. It's
Kind of
still
buried.
Mike singing, but it's very much the sort of yelpy teenager type emo vocal. But done in a really lovely way, and the way it's mixed into the instrumentals makes a lot of sense. I think people were really disappointed when American Football 2 came out, which I maintain is a really underrated album and a genuinely good follow up to that first album, where Mike was, I'd say, just as upfront in the mix on that album as he is on the Owen album that we're reviewing.
Yeah,
Um,
I imagine if you followed him through the years, which I
yeah, yeah.
don't understand why fans didn't, because, he did continue to have a very prolific career releasing stuff under Owen. I imagine some did, but not all. If you came to the second American football album by way of that, it shouldn't have been such a surprise how they did on that one, I guess.
Yeah, and I remember when that album dropped, people were saying this sounds like American football, but with Owen vocals. And yeah, maybe so, but his vocals are pretty nice. I'd say lyrically, this album isn't much to write home about, especially compared to the recent American football albums. I think those do a lot more interesting things lyrically. You can see his head is more sort of focused on making better material with those albums, I think. I don't know if the other band members co-write the lyrics in those cases. Here it feels a bit more like bedroom recordings to me, like the sort of things he'd probably just come up with outside of a studio setting. Not to say it doesn't sound good, it sounds very well produced, this album. All the different layers of instrumentation have their own little pocket and sound nice.
Kind of like Alex, I do think that the album can be hard to listen to all at once, even though it is quite lovely. It's like the loveliness of the music and his singing kind of buries some of the lyrics, which like have kind of some have like you know subject matter leaning on kind of dark. Some are just like really mopey. Which I mean like
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
it's like I'm an emo fan, and he's a famous emo musician, so I shouldn't be complaining about this probably, but it's just like a lot of it just feels really mopey in an immature way, and like maybe
Mm.
that's kind of the point. Like I mean, I've said before, I love Pinkerton, and even with all the problematic lyrics in there, I
Oh, but
get what
Pinkerton's on a total extreme compared to this. Like, Pinkerton stands out so much that you kind of either love it or hate it. You can't really be sort of in the middle about it. Whereas
yeah.
this is more sort of like in line with typical emo music.
Yeah, and it's like it definitely isn't anywhere near as extreme as Pinkerton or like comically stereotypical emo lyrics like you would get from like Hawthorne Heights or something.
It isn't whiny tonally. Maybe
No,
there's
but
some lines that could be described as whiny, but I don't think the delivery is whiny, and that does a lot for it, honestly.
yeah, but
Yeah.
then like taking it all in one sitting, it really does kind of get hard to ignore how whiny some of the lyrics are.
Oh, yeah. There's the odd lyric that definitely caught me off guard and made me think, okay, that's not a particularly poetic or well written lyric or just well thought out lyric. And those moments stood out to me a lot more because I think his writing on the American football albums of late has generally been really good. But the thing is, I think the instrumentals on here, for the most part, are so cozy and relaxing and just wistful that it's very easy to ignore that part of the album and just lose myself in the instrumentals, I think. But it's definitely an aspect that should be criticized, I think.
I could definitely agree to you maybe on my first 2 or 3 listens, but by my 4th or 5th listen, I was definitely focusing more on the lyrics because I grew accustomed to the music. And, they're intertwined at this point, so even though I love how it sounds, and I do generally appreciate the sort of macabre, dark, I'm going to say again, morose at certain points, lyrics on here, they're so intertwined at this point, like, yeah, I can dig the music quite a bit. It's the main reason I like it, and his singing, has to be said. The singing, some of the backing vocals as well, especially on Mum and Dead, that one especially, is great, but I can't listen to this for relaxing reasons anymore. I mean,
right.
I kind of can, but I kind of can't as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I kind of just tune out of a lot of the lyrics, honestly. I think my brain's just made the decision, because I've heard this a few times now, and maybe I'll have the same issue as you, Alex, where I'll start maybe tiring of the instrumentals a bit more. I mean, there's some instrumentals on here, like, well, particularly the last 3 tracks, I think, that I already got kind of bored of after the first listen.
Yeah, you could definitely say they trail off a little bit, even though they're still about the same quality musical level. It's just, I don't know, and especially when you've heard the past 6 songs or so, it's same themes explored. I guess I Go Ego is a little bit better than the other 2.
On the whole, the album does this thing which does, like, mildly annoy me, which is it plays into these lightly depressive tropes, and it does have, like, a morose vibe to it, but it doesn't seem to be looking for any answers artistically or philosophically. It kind of just seems to be this very shallow self-acknowledgement, and maybe it is a little bit sort of like wailing in it a little bit, but doesn't stop him from making the instrumentals very cozy.
No,
so it's
that's true.
I don't know, it's kind of my biggest issue with this album is the lyrics, and they just don't get in the way that much, the way they're mixed, I don't think. Did you have any favorite tracks? I mean, for me, this album, you can really summarize a lot of the songs like in the same breath, I think, not necessarily because they're like bad or generic, but because it does a lot of the same things over the course of the runtime. Maybe to the extent where the reason I dislike those last 3 tracks a bit more is because by that point, maybe you've sort of heard enough of it. I thought the first 3 tracks were definitely the best tracks here, I've got to say that.
I'd say that my 2 favourites were On With The Show and The Contours. I think that's a really good 1-2 punch.
Oh yeah. No, actually, I would include The Contours in the sort of best tracks here. So let's say first 4. I'd say Mum and Dad as well has some great instrumentation.
Yeah, broken up by the slightly cringy I Should Have Known.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I do like that song, I Should Have Known, generally, but, opening it with I Could Take My Cake and Fuck It Too, I mean, yeah.
That's another one where instrumentally it's so nice, but lyrically it's not something that's going to stick with me for good reasons.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where the verse of that one, the first verse, it's just such an edgelord kind of thing. And then, like, his reply to, like, being told, that's disgusting, why would you say something like that, is just so petty. It's like, it's hard to believe this guy is in his 40s,
Yeah. And, it's hard to tell if he's even being serious with it or not, but, like, there's not enough depth here lyrically
I mean,
to know.
It's obviously a sad song about his breakup, and it, like, reflective enough fuck up on his part for not everything seems this way in retrospect. Talks about objects in the rear view mirror of, like, as an analogy for stuff looking back at. So it's fine, but it's hard to truly get into it with that as the opening line, but I don't know. Like I was saying, The Contours is actually, I'd extend that to be one of the most beautiful songs I've heard in a while, full stop. The build-up to the choruses, which land really strongly, is excellent. I love the atmosphere. I love the slow, measured way he sings. I'm not sure I'll ever get over the contours. It's the way he sings that. I can't explain it. It's just a way it makes me feel that is so good. So
I'm with you there, man. I think there's a lot of little moments like that
yeah,
on the album that are really nice.
I'd even say that's like a magical moment, and I don't often say that. I don't think I've ever described much on this channel as being a magical moment, but I guess that could constitute as one. On With the Show is excellent. Kind of more up tempo, but definitely not upbeat. With a more pronounced beat to it.
Yeah, I think that song has a lot in common with the last American Football album. It felt like, of all the songs here, yeah, that one would have fit on that album a lot better.
That bodes well with me checking them out soon, because I definitely wanted to hear more of that, because it's kind of the only song that sounds like that to me. Like it has a really tangible hook to it. So yeah, that was a little bit different. But yeah, basically I have the same as you. First four. I like Mum and Dead as well. Pretty consistently good stuff, honestly. I wouldn't say there's actually anything bad on here, so yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing outright bad, I don't think. It's a very relaxing, easy listen, and while that's not, the greatest praise I can hand out to an album, it's still doing what I think it's trying to accomplish to some degree. It's hard to know how much stock he was really putting in the lyrical side of this album when you have those American Football albums for comparison's sake. This is just so much weaker in that regard, I think. I think the opening track does do some ambitious things in terms of the way it's sequenced, the structure of the song. I thought that did a lot to distinguish this right off the bat from American Football's material. For me personally, as someone who's not listened to Owen before, it really helped me not be in that headspace of, well, this just sounds like American Football. And even if it did, that wouldn't be a big deal. But, when you have like the same vocalist and the same guitarist on a project because it's the same guy.
I'm convinced that I heard At Home with Owen without knowing he was anything to do with American Football. I thought I just found this really obscure 2000 singer-songwriter like independently of that, which I guess I have because I still haven't connected the association. So to me this is just like checking out more Owen. Like, who's Kinsella? It's Owen to me.
I mean, yeah, it seems to go both ways. I mean, Owen does seem to have
That's
big
probably
following.
A far less common, unique point of view, I guess.
Well, on that note, I guess we can go into conclusions. I do think that I've mentioned a few times throughout this review that this has a lot in common with American Football 3, especially instrumentally. It aims for more sort of lush, spacious, and atmospheric arrangements. Big emphasis on like low tempo BPMs throughout. And there's a lot of emphasis on atmosphere in the production with strings and guitar plucks and light piano melodies being thickened up by what I'm assuming is some carefully applied reverb and delay. The songs themselves feel very cozy, and songwriting-wise, they're not amazing, but, they are pleasant. The guitar playing is very good throughout, and I think the extra little layers of instrumentation and some of the production choices help keep it interesting throughout. It doesn't just turn it into a complete haze. So yeah, if you're into American Football and you also like sort of indie folk type stuff, I would recommend this. It's a light 6 out of 10 for me. Pretty good album.
Yeah, I'll give this a 7 out of 10. Definitely a good album. I wouldn't say as good as At Home with Owen, but I guess that's seen as somewhat of his best Owen project, or at least one of the most notable ones, so maybe that's unlikely to expect. Basically just really nice sounding stuff, although the deeper you dig, the more morose, sad, dark it gets. But if you're kind of on a more background listen, it's definitely some really well done, nice sounding arrangements. Yeah, basically I got a lot out of this album. Definitely rewards a lot of repeated listens. There's a lot to dig in here. I enjoyed it quite a bit. 7 out of 10.
I'm also in the 7 out of 10 camp for this one. I would love to give it an 8. I love everything about the sound of this album. I love production on the guitars. I love all the strings and horns that he adds very subtly in the background. And there's even some instances where there's glockenspiel or some other kind of pitched percussion. That's just like
Maybe some xylophone, maybe?
yeah. I mean, like xylophone and glockenspiel are pretty similar. It's just like one's
they
wood
are.
and one's metal. So
And
yeah,
they're
so
both great.
yep, they're both lovely when they're used right. And he uses whichever one or both he uses to really good effect in the background of some of these songs. Like you can listen to it and like not even notice it the first couple of times, and then
Yeah.
Well, that was another instrument that had a huge presence on the last American Football album. Maybe it was one of the main things that made me make that link in my head.
yeah, I really need to listen to those. The last 2 and 3. Anyway, honestly, I think like I didn't get into this before, but like, I think my favorite track might actually be "I Go Ego," just because I said I had some trouble just getting through the album on repeated listens, the way some of the lyrics are. But honestly, that song just like makes it all worth it for me. Just the way it just like has a great build up with the instruments in it and brings in. Actually, I think there was some slide guitar earlier in the album, but this one like brings it back a little more prominently, along with all the other wonderful things
Some great
about it.
string arrangements at the end of that one.
Yeah, I mean, like you could almost take a section out of this and tell me it was like from a Sigur Rós song.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So 7 out of 10?
yeah, 7 out of 10 altogether. Just a pretty good album.
Nice. Well, that's it for us, guys. Thanks for joining us on Busted Speakers for this review of the new Owen album, The Avalanche. What did you think of this album? Let us know in the comments below. You can follow us on Twitter at _Busted Speakers. You can follow Cam on Twitter at subprospector, and give us a like and a subscribe if you feel like it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.